For decades, humanity was treated as nothing, and the galaxy made sure humans felt it every single day. Inside the vast galactic council chamber, built from crystal towers and floating light rings, human delegates stood in silence while powerful alien races laughed openly at them. The delegates did not shout, did not argue, and did not beg. They simply stood there, hands folded, faces calm, eyes forward. Around them, alien leaders mocked human emotions, calling them weak, calling them fragile, calling them a species that survived only because stronger races allowed it. Every insult echoed through the chamber, recorded, archived, and broadcast across the stars. When humans tried to speak, their microphones were muted. When they requested hearings, their requests were delayed. When they voted, their votes were ignored. Slowly, quietly, Earth lost its voice in the galaxy. The Council stripped humanity of voting rights, claiming humans were unstable. Trade routes once feeding Earth's colonies were blocked without warning. Human ships were searched, delayed, or turned away. Outer colonies began to starve and no aid fleets came. One by one, human worlds went dark, not with explosions but with silence. Communication relays shut down. Supply lanes collapsed. Medical stations closed. Families waited for help that never arrived. The galaxy watched and did nothing. No fleets came to defend humanity. No protests rose from allied worlds. No threats were issued by Earth. Humanity simply stopped responding. To the rest of the galaxy, it looked like surrender. Analysts on council worlds declared humans broken. Scholars wrote papers calling humanity a failed species. Some even announced that humanity had gone extinct, wiped out not by war, but by neglect. And while the galaxy moved on, celebrating its peace and power, it never noticed what was happening far beyond mapped space. Deep in uncharted darkness, where ancient star charts ended and warning symbols began, hidden shipyards burned with silent light. Massive structures, older than most galactic empires, came alive after centuries of sleep. Human engineers moved through vast halls without banners or speeches, their faces focused, their movements precise. No music played, no announcements echoed. Orders were passed quietly, directly, and obeyed without hesitation. Ancient human war plans were unlocked from sealed vaults, written by commanders long erased from public history. These were plans made not for conquest, but for survival. Old commanders returned from exile, men and women once called too ruthless, too cold, too dangerous by the council. They did not give speeches. They did not celebrate their return. They simply took their stations. Humanity did not forget the laughter. Humanity did not forget the silence. Humanity did not forget the worlds that went dark. While the galaxy believed humans had accepted their fate, humanity was counting every insult, every loss, every moment of humiliation. Years passed, and still no response came from Earth. Alien traders flew through former human space and found nothing. No signals, no debris, no patrols. Just clean, empty systems as if humanity had been erased with care. Confidence spread across the galaxy. Empires expanded into old human territory, mining resources once guarded by human fleets. Some alien captains joked about selling souvenirs labeled, "Last Human World." In council chambers, humanity became a lesson, a warning told to young species about knowing their place. But far from those chambers, deep beneath armored hulls and artificial stars, humanity waited. Training simulations ran without pause. New fleets were assembled in total secrecy, their hulls darker than space itself, their systems silent and efficient. Children born in the shadows were taught history not as glory, but as debt. They learned the names of lost colonies. They memorized the dates the council turned away. They learned one rule above all others. Silence is not weakness, it is preparation. Humanity did not rage. Humanity did not rush. Humanity learned. When the galaxy finally noticed something was wrong, it would already be too late. Because humanity was not gone. Humanity was not broken. Humanity was not extinct. Humanity was watching, rebuilding, and waiting for the moment when the galaxy would remember what it meant to ignore a species that had nothing left to lose. The galaxy moved on as if humanity had never mattered, and that forgetting cut deeper than any weapon ever could. In the great star systems where alien capitals shined bright, celebrations continued, treaties were signed, and new empires rose on the remains of old ones, while the name human slowly faded into something outdated and unimportant. Historians rewrote records, shortening humanity's time in the galaxy to a brief, embarrassing chapter, describing humans as emotional creatures who could not survive without protection. In academies, students laughed when human wars were mentioned, calling them primitive and chaotic, proof that humans were never meant to stand among advanced species. Trade guilds erased human routes from their maps, replacing them with new paths claimed by stronger powers. Former human colonies were renamed, their skies filled with alien flags, their cities stripped down and rebuilt without memory or respect. No monuments were left, no apologies were made. The silence from Earth continued, and the galaxy took that silence as proof of defeat. Merchants traveled through former human space without fear, joking over open channels that ghosts were easier neighbors than humans ever were. Patrol fleets stopped scanning those regions. Sensors were turned off. Warnings were ignored. Humanity had become a myth people no longer believed in. But silence does not mean absence, and forgetting does not erase pain. Deep in the darkness beyond known routes, humanity watched everything. Hidden listening stations absorbed every broadcast, every insult, every lie spoken about Earth. Human analysts stood in quiet rooms, faces hard, recording how the galaxy spoke when it believed no one was listening. They watched alien fleets grow careless. They watched admirals boast. They watched the council argue among itself, divided, arrogant, convinced that no forgotten species could ever rise again. Humanity did not interrupt. Humanity did not respond. Humanity learned. Then came the mistake that would change everything. A medium-sized alien mining fleet, greedy and impatient, crossed into a system once marked in old charts as restricted human territory. The warning beacon was ancient, its signal weak, its language no longer taught. The fleet commander laughed and ordered it shut down. Mining ships spread out, drills cutting into asteroids that had once supplied human shipyards. For hours, nothing happened. No alarms. No resistance. Confidence grew. Then, without warning, every screen went dark at once. Engines powered down. Weapons systems froze. Even emergency lights failed, leaving crews floating in cold silence. Panic rose as crews shouted into dead comms, their voices unheard. Then a voice filled every ship, calm and clear, spoken in perfect galactic standard. It did not shout. It did not threaten. It simply said, "You were warned once." The words carried no anger, and that was what terrified them most. Seconds later, power returned just long enough for the crews to see something outside their viewports. A shape, vast and impossible, hanging in space without movement or signal, blacker than the void itself. Before anyone could react, the signal cut, and the mining fleet vanished from every sensor in the sector. No explosion, no debris, no survivors. When nearby systems noticed the disappearance, officials dismissed it as a navigation failure. The council quietly sealed the incident, labeling it classified to avoid panic. But fear had already begun to spread. Traders whispered. Scouts reported sensor shadows that vanished when approached. Entire patrols refused assignments near old human space. And still, humanity said nothing. Inside human command vaults, no cheers followed the disappearance. No celebration. The commanders simply marked a symbol on a growing map. The galaxy was still not ready. Humanity would wait longer. Emotion ran deep among humans, but it was controlled, focused, sharpened into purpose. They remembered children crying on dying colonies. They remembered diplomats standing silent while being mocked. They remembered how the galaxy looked away. Every memory became fuel. Humanity was no longer asking to be heard. Humanity was preparing to be undeniable. And as the galaxy continued to forget, laugh, and grow careless, the quiet shadow of humanity stretched across the stars, unseen but unavoidable, moving closer with every passing moment, ready to remind the universe what happens when silence is mistaken for weakness. The first true sign of humanity's return did not come with an announcement or a declaration of war. It came with fear spreading faster than any signal could travel, because fear does not need permission to exist. At the edge of a major trade system, one of the busiest crossroads in the galaxy, alien traffic moved as it always had, cargo ships drifting in neat lines, escort fleets relaxed, commanders bored and confident, believing the age of real threats was long over. This system had once been protected by human fleets before humanity was erased from the maps, and now it stood open and undefended, a symbol of how completely humans had been forgotten. Then the stars began to behave strangely. Long-range sensors reported shadows where nothing should exist, readings that made no sense and were quickly dismissed as errors. Navigators complained that jump calculations felt wrong, as if space itself had shifted slightly out of alignment. Still, no alarms were raised. No one believed a forgotten species could reach this far. Then, without warning, space went quiet. Not empty, but silent in a way that made seasoned pilots uneasy. Communications lagged by fractions of a second. Automated systems paused as if listening for something they could not understand. And then they appeared. Massive human warships slid into real space without flashes or distortion, as if they had always been there and were only now allowing themselves to be seen. Their hulls were black, not reflective, swallowing light instead of bending it. No symbols marked them. No energy signatures flared. They did not move aggressively. They simply existed, filling the void with their presence. Alien captains froze, staring at displays that screamed impossible mass readings. These ships were larger than anything the galaxy had ever built, larger than Council dreadnoughts, larger than the weapons once used to break human colonies. Panic spread through command channels as officers shouted conflicting orders. Some fleets tried to raise shields. Others powered weapons. None of it mattered. The human ships did not fire first. Instead, every alien system began to fail in perfect sequence. Weapons powered down. Shields collapsed. Engines locked. Fleets were left drifting, helpless, exposed, humiliated. Not a single shot had been fired. Then a transmission spread across every open channel, not just in the system, but leaking into nearby sectors as well. A human voice spoke, calm, steady, unmistakably controlled. This space remembers who was abandoned. There was no anger in the words, and that terrified the listeners more than rage ever could. Alien admirals begged for clarification, demanded negotiations, threatened retaliation, but the human ships did not respond. One by one, alien warships were disabled and gently pushed aside. Not destroyed, not damaged beyond repair, just removed from relevance. Civilian vessels were allowed to leave unharmed, carrying panic and disbelief to the rest of the galaxy. When the human fleet finally moved, it did so with slow certainty, advancing deeper into the system, claiming it without resistance. News of the encounter spread like fire. Reports were chaotic, filled with fear and denial. Some claimed the ships were automated weapons left behind by extinct humans. Others said they were ancient machines awakened by accident. The Council released statements urging calm, insisting there was no proof humanity had returned. But behind closed doors, Council leaders shook. Old intelligence files were reopened. Forgotten warnings were reread. Names of human commanders once exiled resurfaced, and fear grew as patterns became clear. This was not random. This was not revenge driven by emotion. This was strategy. Across hidden human command centers, officers watched the results in silence. No cheers followed. No smiles appeared. The emotion ran deep, but it was controlled, disciplined, focused. Humanity remembered the times they had begged for help and received silence. Now the galaxy begged for answers and received the same. For the first time in generations, alien civilizations felt what humans once felt. Powerless, unheard, exposed. And as human fleets continued to appear at key points across the stars, always silent, always precise, always unstoppable, the galaxy began to understand a terrible truth. Humanity had not returned to shout. Humanity had returned to teach the galaxy what silence really means. Panic finally reached the heart of the galaxy, and when it did, it was raw, desperate, and filled with regret that came far too late. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, the same place where humans had once stood in silence and been mocked, alarms echoed through crystal walls as leaders from dozens of species shouted over one another. Holographic displays showed system after system marked in red, trade lanes frozen, military fleets disabled without battle, and shadows of human warships appearing where no one expected them. The laughter that once filled this chamber was gone, replaced by fear and disbelief. Council members demanded explanations, accused each other of hiding information, and argued over who had provoked humanity first, even though they all knew the truth. They had all ignored the warnings. They had all benefited from humanity's fall. For the first time in decades, the Council voted unanimously on something. They needed to speak to Earth. The message they prepared was careful, polite, filled with words like cooperation and mutual understanding. They spoke of past misunderstandings, of shared responsibility, of moving forward together. It was a message humanity had once begged to hear. It was sent across the stars with priority clearance, carried on the strongest transmitters the Council possessed. Then the Council waited. Minutes passed, then hours. The chamber grew quiet as leaders stared at the empty space where a reply should appear. When the response finally arrived, it was not a speech, not a negotiation, not a threat. It was a single transmission, broadcast across every human-controlled system and leaking into surrounding space. One human voice spoke, slow and steady. "You found your voice when we returned. Where was it when we were abandoned?" The message ended there. No channel remained open. No response was allowed. As the Council reeled from the words, human fleets continued their advance. They did not bombard worlds. They did not destroy cities. Instead, they dismantled power with terrifying precision. Military command centers lost control of their fleets. Defense grids shut down as if unplugged. Admirals found themselves issuing orders that no longer reached anyone. Entire empires realized they could not protect themselves, not because humanity was attacking too fast, but because humanity had already planned every move. Across alien worlds, civilians watched their skies, terrified but untouched, realizing that this was not conquest driven by cruelty. This was restraint, and restraint made it worse. Alien leaders tried again, sending private apologies, offering reparations, promising reforms. None were answered. In human command centers, commanders listened in silence, remembering how human diplomats had once sent similar messages while colonies starved. Those messages had been ignored too. Humanity was not angry now. Anger fades. What remained was memory. Across the galaxy, systems fell under human control without a single battle. Supply lines were rerouted. Economic hubs were isolated. Empires built on exploiting weaker species began to collapse from the inside, unable to move fleets or trade goods. The Council's authority shattered as member worlds began to act independently, some trying to surrender, others preparing hopeless defenses. The Council chamber, once the symbol of galactic power, became a room full of frightened voices talking to themselves. And still, humanity said nothing more. The silence was intentional, heavy, and suffocating. It forced the galaxy to sit with its fear, to remember every moment it had dismissed humanity as weak and unimportant. As human fleets surrounded the core worlds, close enough to be seen with the naked eye, the truth became unavoidable. Humanity had returned not to ask for forgiveness, not to negotiate from weakness, but to remind the galaxy of a lesson it had refused to learn. Power ignored does not disappear. It waits as the galaxy trembled under humanity's silent advance. Fragments of truth began to surface, and those fragments cut deeper than fear ever could. It did not start with an announcement. It started with leaks. Old data streams, long-forgotten archives, sealed intelligence files suddenly appeared across neutral networks, intercepted and shared by terrified analysts who finally realized that humanity's silence had never been emptiness. These records showed what truly happened after the galaxy turned away. When the Council blocked trade routes and abandoned human colonies, humanity did not collapse. Humanity changed. The loss broke something fragile, but it forged something unbreakable. Scattered human worlds that survived learned to depend only on each other. Borders dissolved. Old rivalries ended. Governments that argued while people suffered were dismantled and replaced by a single unified command, not ruled by pride or politics, but by survival. The galaxy had mistaken human emotion for weakness, never understanding that emotion, once controlled, becomes resolve. In hidden shipyards and deep space sanctuaries, humanity rebuilt not just fleets, but itself. Children were raised on stories of worlds that went dark and pleas that went unanswered. They were not taught hatred. They were taught memory. They learned that trust without strength leads to extinction. Human scientists studied alien technology taken from abandoned battlefields and wreckage left behind by careless empires. They learned how council shields failed, how alien command structures depended on hierarchy and ego, how fleets panicked when leaders fell silent. Humanity designed weapons not to destroy planets, but to remove control, to strip power without spilling blood, because bloodshed was never the goal. Control was. The galaxy also learned why human commanders once exiled as monsters were recalled. These were leaders who understood restraint better than mercy, who knew that terror lasts longer when violence is limited. They remembered standing in council chambers while their microphones were cut, remembered begging for aid while their people starved, remembered how easy it was for the galaxy to look away. Now, as alien leaders begged for dialogue, those same commanders watched calmly, feeling no satisfaction, only grim confirmation. Humanity's silence during those lost decades was not hesitation. It was preparation layered upon preparation. Every insult logged. Every abandoned system studied. Every council decision mapped. The galaxy had grown predictable, comfortable, arrogant. Humanity used that. As the truth spread, panic deepened. Some alien worlds rioted when they realized their leaders had lied about humanity's extinction. Others demanded surrender before human fleets arrived. Smaller species, once ignored like humans had been, quietly hoped humanity would win. For them, this was not a war. It was justice unfolding slowly. Across human-controlled space, there were no victory parades, no celebrations. The mood was heavy, almost mournful. Humans knew that nothing they did could bring back the dead worlds or the voices lost to silence. This was not revenge fueled by rage. This was a promise kept to the forgotten. As human fleets held position around key systems, a final truth settled into the galaxy's collective mind, heavy and unavoidable. Humanity did not disappear because it was weak. Humanity disappeared because it learned that survival sometimes requires becoming invisible, patient, and terrifyingly prepared. And now, with every secret revealed and every illusion shattered, the galaxy finally understood the cost of ignoring a species that had nothing left to lose and everything left to remember. The moment the galaxy had feared finally arrived, not with alarms or dramatic warnings, but with a quiet shift in reality that every species felt at the same time. Across hundreds of systems, sensors began to report the same impossible readings. Space itself seemed heavier, slower, as if something massive was pressing down on it from all directions. Trade lanes flickered. Long-range comms distorted. Even ancient stars showed strange fluctuations, and for the first time in recorded history, multiple empires stopped fighting each other and turned their attention toward a single truth they could no longer deny. Humanity was no longer advancing in silence. Humanity was positioning for judgment. In desperation, the largest armada the galaxy had ever assembled gathered near the core worlds. A force made from dozens of empires that once laughed at humans standing shoulder to shoulder in fear. Thousands of warships filled the void, their weapons charged, their crews shaking, their admirals trying to sound confident while knowing confidence meant nothing now. They told themselves numbers would matter. They told themselves technology would matter. They told themselves humanity was still just one species. Then the human fleet arrived. It did not jump in all at once. It emerged slowly, layer by layer, ships appearing at impossible angles, some closer than scanners allowed, others so far away they looked like distant stars. The scale of it broke minds. These were not fleets built for glory or intimidation. These were fleets built to end arguments. When the first alien admiral ordered fire, The command barely left his mouth before every weapon in the armada shut down. Power drained as if pulled by an unseen hand. Shields collapsed without impact. Engines failed in perfect synchronization. Panic exploded across channels as officers screamed reports that made no sense. Then the human response came, broadcast across every open frequency, calm and absolute. This ends now. Space bent. Not violently, not chaotically, but precisely. Entire lines of alien warships were crushed inward, not destroyed, but folded, forced into dead space where nothing could move or transmit. Others were frozen in place, locked between moments, alive but helpless. The galaxy watched in horror as the armada, built over centuries, ceased to exist as a threat in minutes. No explosions lit the void. No heroic last stands were recorded. There was only silence and wreckage drifting like forgotten ideas. Across countless worlds, civilians cried as they watched their leaders fail them completely. The myth of galactic power shattered. Empires that once dictated law now begged their populations for calm they could not provide. And humanity did not chase fleeing ships. Humanity did not finish the kill. That restraint was the true terror, because it proved this was not loss of control. This was choice. Inside human command chambers, commanders watched the outcome without celebration. Some closed their eyes, remembering children lost on darkened worlds. Others tightened their fists, feeling the weight of lives spared and lives already gone. Humanity had crossed a line they could never uncross, and they knew it. But they also knew why it had to happen. The galaxy had needed proof. Not words, not warnings. Proof. When the human fleets finally powered down their weapons and held position, the message was clear to every species watching from trembling worlds. Humanity could end the galaxy if it wished. Instead, it chose to stop here. The stars themselves seemed quieter afterward, as if even the universe was holding its breath. And in that heavy silence, the galaxy finally understood the full meaning of human wrath. It was not loud. It was not reckless. It was controlled, remembered, and unstoppable once unleashed. After the armada fell silent and the galaxy's greatest military power collapsed into helpless wreckage, something far worse than destruction settled over the stars. Understanding. Across thousands of worlds, leaders realized that this was not a war they could win, negotiate, or escape. Humanity had already proven its point, and now it was time for judgment. Not loud judgment, not violent judgment, but something colder and far more permanent. Human fleets moved again, not in chaotic strikes, but in measured patterns that followed lines drawn long ago in forgotten human archives. They surrounded core worlds without firing a single shot, positioning themselves close enough to be seen with the naked eye from planetary surfaces. Billions of alien civilians stood under their skies, staring at massive black shapes hanging above their worlds like silent gods, waiting for something terrible to happen. But nothing did. Days passed, then weeks. No bombardment came. No invasion followed. Instead, systems began to change in ways no one had expected. Galactic banking networks shut down under human control. Trade licenses issued by the Council were invalidated overnight. Military command authorities lost access to their own fleets. The Galactic Council itself was cut off, its communications isolated, its influence erased without a single explosion. The chamber that once mocked humanity became irrelevant, its leaders trapped inside a symbol that no longer meant anything. Then humanity finally spoke again, and this time the message was broadcast to every world, every station, every ship, translated perfectly into every language. The voice was not angry. It was not triumphant. It was tired. "We are not here to rule you," the voice said. "We are here to end what ruled us." Panic spread at first, then confusion. What did that mean? Slowly, the truth became clear. Empires built on exploitation lost control of the systems they had taken. Species once treated as lesser were granted independence under human protection. Borders were redrawn without negotiation, not to benefit humanity, but to prevent any single power from ever rising unchecked again. Some alien leaders screamed betrayal. Others begged forgiveness. Some offered their worlds, their fleets, their lives. None of it changed anything. Humanity was not interested in apologies. Apologies did not save starving colonies. Apologies did not answer unanswered calls for help. Forgiveness, humanity had learned, was not something the galaxy deserved on demand. Yet humanity did not exterminate. That was the mercy. Worlds were spared. Civilizations continued. Children were allowed to grow up without fire raining from the sky. But the old order was gone forever. Those who had laughed the loudest now lived under constant watch, their power limited, their ambitions permanently restrained. And that restraint was the punishment, because it forced them to live with memory, just as humans had. Inside human fleets, the mood remained heavy. Veterans stared at starfields, remembering lost homes. Younger officers asked questions no one could fully answer. Had this been worth it? Had humanity become what it feared? Commanders reminded them of one truth. They had not chosen this path first. It had been forced upon them by silence and neglect. Humanity had not come back to be loved. Humanity had come back to ensure no species would ever be abandoned the way it had been. As human fleets slowly withdrew from the core worlds, leaving behind a galaxy reshaped but still alive, one feeling echoed everywhere they passed. Relief mixed with fear. Relief that humanity had shown restraint. Fear because that restraint could be withdrawn if history repeated itself. And in that quiet balance between mercy and judgment, the galaxy finally learned the lesson it had ignored for generations. Humanity did not need to rule the galaxy to control its future. Humanity only needed to make sure the galaxy would never dare to forget them again. Years passed, but the silence humanity left behind never truly faded. It settled into the galaxy like a permanent scar, invisible yet impossible to ignore. The Great Wars ended not with treaties or celebrations, but with quiet rebuilding under a new reality that everyone understood without needing it explained. The Galactic Council no longer existed as a seat of power. Its chamber still floated in space, empty and unused, a hollow monument to arrogance and failure. Young species visited it as a warning, not a symbol of unity, but of what happens when power forgets responsibility. Across the stars, new alliances formed carefully, humbly, always aware that somewhere beyond the maps humanity was watching. Human fleets had returned to their borders, but those borders were no longer lines on charts. They were ideas, boundaries of behavior the galaxy dared not cross. Trade resumed, but no longer under threat or exploitation. Smaller species once ignored now had voices protected by human enforcement protocols that required no constant presence, only the knowledge that interference would be noticed. Children across countless worlds studied a single lesson in their history streams. Silence is not surrender. On Earth and its surviving colonies, there were no monuments celebrating victory. Instead, names of lost worlds were engraved into stone and steel, reminders of the cost of being unheard. Families visited those memorials in silence, knowing nothing could bring the dead back, but believing their suffering had finally been acknowledged. Veterans returned to civilian life carrying memories they did not speak of, because some victories are too heavy to celebrate. Humanity did not declare itself ruler of the galaxy. It did not demand tribute or obedience. It demanded memory, and that demand reshaped everything. Generations later, alien explorers passing through old human space felt unease even though nothing threatened them. The systems were calm, orderly, watched by automated defenses that never slept. No warning beacons shouted. No patrols chased intruders. The restraint itself was the warning. Stories spread among starfarers of what happened when the galaxy ignored a quiet species and mistook patience for weakness. These stories changed how first contact was handled. New species were listened to. Calls for aid were answered faster. No one wanted to risk creating another humanity. And somewhere deep in human-controlled space, commanders monitored the stars without hostility, without hunger for expansion, ready only if needed. Humanity had learned the hardest lesson the galaxy could teach, and in doing so, it had taught the galaxy one in return. Power does not need to scream to be feared. Justice does not always arrive with fire. Sometimes it arrives after a long silence, carried by those who waited, remembered, and refused to disappear. The galaxy moved forward under that truth, forever changed, knowing that if humanity ever spoke again, it would not be to ask for a place among the stars, but to remind them why that place was earned through endurance, restraint, and the terrible strength of being ignored and surviving long enough to return.